Greetings, ICO family. Matthew Kramer here. We're delighted to promote this weekend's virtual concert, which is our second online offering during the age of COVID here. Things have been dramatically different for orchestras all around the country, but we're very proud to say that we have been performing through these very difficult times and staying connected with our patrons in every way that we possibly can. I'm delighted to be joined on this Mocktails by our Associate Concertmaster, Sarah Page. Sarah, thank you for joining me tonight.
Well, thanks for having me.
We're going to take this opportunity to get to know you a little bit better because you play a very important role in this weekend's broadcast, performing Vivaldi's Winter from the Four Seasons. But before we dive in about details about this program, I'd love for the opportunity for our audience to get to know you a little bit better, your background. You're an Indianapolis native, and Indianapolis has played an integral role, I'm sure, in your musical development. But you've gone, abroad and in many different places, performing with many different organizations. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to join the ICO family?
Of course, yeah. As you mentioned, so I was born and raised here in the south side of Indianapolis, which I'm currently living here, and I studied with Dean Franck, who was assistant concertmaster of the Indianapolis Symphony for a very long time. So that's kind of where I got my start here. I did my undergrad at the University of Indianapolis, where I studied with mainly Austin Hartman for 3 years, who's now a member of the Pacifica Quartet at IU, and Dr. Ariana Kim, who is now at Cornell University. Both incredible musicians, incredible chamber musicians. It was an honor to study with them. Then after that, I went to Cleveland, the Cleveland Institute of Music, for my master's degree, where I studied with the then concertmaster of the Cleveland Orchestra. And I was also part of the intensive quartet seminar with the Cavani Quartet, which is a lot of fun to be a part of. Very inspiring people. Spent a few more years there in Cleveland teaching and freelancing. Last year, I found myself in Ann Arbor doing a certificate program at the University of Michigan with the concertmaster of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, David Halen, an incredibly intelligent music maker. It's fantastic working with him. So I think it was 2018 that I auditioned for ICO, I believe it was. And honestly, it's such a dream to be able to play and perform with an ensemble that I grew up listening to, and many people who I very much admire and consider musical mentors in a way. So it really is an honor to come back and play with you all, be a part of the organization finally. So I guess that's kind of the brief history, I guess. And I guess one fun fact would be that my grandfather plays violin, and so that's kind of the musical connection in the family. I started when I was 10, and I think I took maybe a year of lessons from him. So that's always been a really, really great connection there. So,
and in such a short amount of time, you've made a major mark with this ensemble, stepping into the leadership position as concertmaster on numerous occasions, including this entire virtual season so far, which we'll talk about in a moment. But just want to mention that you and I share that same experience with the chamber orchestra as an undergraduate violin performance major at Butler. 5 of my former teachers were in the orchestra, 3 of them still are. So it is a very unique opportunity. Not many people have the experience that we do. Walking into leadership positions with an orchestra that was really a formative part of our musical development here. But your background is so fascinating because you've studied with these major concertmasters of major U.S. orchestras, but you're talking about a chamber music background. How would you explain to somebody what your chamber music background has done to further your experience in an orchestra, and then vice versa? What is it about playing chamber music that helps you develop as a musician?
I would say that probably the best orchestras in the world are filled with musicians who are first and foremost chamber players, chamber musicians. Music, I think, at its core is all about communication. And if you watch the best string quartet musicians, and if you watch them perform, there's so much nonverbal communication that's going on, whether that's your body language or the faces that you're making towards one another. But that's essential, I think, to any great music making. And the best orchestras do it, whether it's large or small. But the advantage of having a chamber orchestra, the size of that is, the people in the back don't get left out. In symphony orchestras, there's 14 violins, and you're in the back of the stand, you feel like you're in your own little island back there. So having the size of a chamber orchestra is really great for that. And they kind of feed each other in that. So yeah, all about communication for sure.
Very well stated. And certainly to the point of communication in a small ensemble, that has dramatically changed for us with all of the protocol that we're following for safety and returning to work. Things are much, much different. And we've talked on this program at length with different people and myself, of course, about what has changed. It looks dramatically different from an audience perspective, but it feels even more alien to us as performers. Can you talk to us, what it's like performing, with your colleagues in a way it's so antithetical to what music making should be? We're now 6 feet apart for strings. We're 12 feet apart for winds. And we're masked, so you can barely hear each other breathe, and breathing is not encouraged in the same way that it was before. What's it like performing in the time of COVID?
Of course, yeah. So first of all, a huge thank you and shout out to the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, to the administration, and to you for making some kind of season happen. That, to those of you who are listening, that hasn't happened in a lot of organizations. So it's really is a huge feat. And we're all incredibly thankful for it. That being said, there are a lot of barriers to the communication process, and space is a huge thing. You'll notice we're lucky enough to use Clues Hall at Butler University, which, it's a huge stage. Broadway productions come there. And, I just remember in the first recordings was with the Beethoven Symphony. And I remember trying to look back at the bassoons, and it was like I needed binoculars to see them. So it's definitely challenging in that sense. And I'm the type of player, I almost want to be inside of your instrument when I'm playing with you. That's how close I would prefer to be. And then of course you mentioned with the masks, there's, as an audience member, you might not see a lot of the communication that happens on the platform, but there's a lot going on up there. So the space, I think, with the mask, it's hard to see the eyes sometimes because the masks come up kind of high. So it hinders communication. So you have to do a lot more, I think, with your body language as much as possible, and moving a lot. Yeah, and I was thinking with the breathing, there's a really famous spot in Vivaldi Winter, of course, where we have tutti. Everybody has this kind of tricky rhythm, and it's really hard to come in together. And usually the trick is to just breathe really loudly, for the soloist to breathe really loudly. And that just wasn't going to work with a mask on. So hopefully, well, I haven't heard the recording, but yeah, a lot of challenges. And I think also, doing a lot of these recordings has really made me appreciate the role that the audience brings to live performance. We miss you guys. There's an energy there. Yeah, it's a really strange thing to kind of finish a piece and there's just silence. So yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more on that point. Even in the 2 broadcasts that we've had virtually, we've had a handful of our board members in the very back of Clues. And for anyone that's been in Clues, that 6 people in Clues feels like nothing. It really is nothing. So to hear a spattering of clapping hands,
they're back there like, oh.
No matter how, we need to feed in, the stadium noise like they do in the NFL games or something, because it certainly doesn't feel like a normal experience. And to your point about, the spacing with the orchestra too, you were mentioning what it's like to be the first violin, in a 14, 16 member section, and you do feel like you're on an island. Well, that's really how it all feels for everybody, to see the bassoons against the very back wall as we're pushed all the way to the front. Certainly, the learning curve is very steep for all of us to try to be able to communicate. And you're talking about more body language and leading more, and which brings me to my next question for you is that you've studied with these concertmasters. You won the audition for associate concertmaster here, but you've spent a lot of time filling in for our concertmaster Tarn Travers, who's been this season in China, and on numerous occasions in the past has been away from us for concerts. Talk to us about the leadership position of being a concertmaster for people who are tuning in, listening, and might be unfamiliar with the terminology. What is it that a concertmaster does other than come out and take a bow and tune the orchestra? There's a lot more to this job, and it's a very big job.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so for those of you who might not know, concertmaster is the first chair of the first violin section in an orchestra. There are a lot of behind the scenes responsibilities, such as doing the bowing. So for us, we have 2 directions, down and up, and it's just a matter of, putting in the bowing so that we all match as a section. I think first and foremost, the role of a concertmaster is really to unite everybody together. The conductor is leading, of course, in the musical interpretation of things, and sometimes the concertmaster needs to interpret that into string speech. Now, of course, you're a violinist, but not all conductors are. So we kind of interpret what they want, put it into our instruments, and kind of lead the section in that. I think concertmasters also play the role of between the principals of the string sections. To me, that's almost like a string quartet or quintet with the bass. And so leading with our body language, kind of the character and placement of things. And it not just the strings, the winds as well. There's so much communication happening between the principals of the winds and the concertmaster, making sure that things are really lined up. Sometimes I think there's a lot of different ways to interpret a downbeat from a conductor. So sometimes it's a little easier to kind of watch exactly where, the concertmaster put things. So really, I just think, we're a uniter amongst all of the sections. I think that would be kind of the primary role, I think, of the concertmaster.
That explanation wholeheartedly. And so I'd love to give our viewers here an example of you in this position. And with the recent recording that we did here, this is not part of our virtual program this weekend, but an additional program that we recorded to offer as musical postcards that our patrons can purchase and send to their friends. This is an example of Vaughn Williams's beautiful setting of Green Sleeves, and we're going to go ahead and roll that now with Sarah Page in the concertmaster position. That was Green Sleeves, adapted by Vaughn Williams, a beautiful rendition, especially this time of year, so timely. Sarah, let's talk a little bit about this weekend's concert that's coming up now, the Vivaldi Winter. You know, this is one of the most ubiquitous, well-known pieces in the repertoire. You know, my wife has had the Spring on her cell phone ringer for like 6 years. Everybody knows the tunes from Winter, but it really is as common as commonly as it is heard and has been for hundreds of years. It was really it really remains kind of a groundbreaking work for violin and so unique in this idiom as well. You know, you're performing my favorite of the four, Winter. Can you talk to us a little bit about this piece? What makes it you think so enduring? You know, that people want to come back and hear this year after year. It seems it is such a popular work. What is it about this piece?
Yeah, it's really a genius composition. All four of the concerti are, and I think for me the magic of this particular concerto really lies in the orchestra parts, and so a lot of people know this music, but they might not know that it's actually composed based off of poems. So he's very much text painting with all of the textures that he's providing in the orchestra as well as the solo part. So to give a couple examples, I guess, the very famous opening, the trills of the violins, and it's usually played ponticello, which is really close to the bridge. And so it gives this really shiver of the cold, right? And it's depicting what's written in the poem there. And then the second movement, very, very famous melody, long strung out, just similar to what Mozart and Mendelssohn would write, in my mind. And what he does in the accompaniment is just simple pizzicato. And it's supposed to emulate rain kind of tapping on the window, as perhaps the melody is, a beautiful conversation between friends with the fire lit. So something really warm and cozy. And then going into the third movement, it's a single bass line, just one note with the solo violin, kind of slowly going through these scales. And to me, it's the poem is talking about walking slowly by yourself through the snow, and it's almost like you open the door after a snowfall, and it's just silent because of the insulation of the snow. So he whether you know this poem or not, you understand it. You understand what he's trying to say. And I guess I was thinking about that when I was preparing the solo part, and he does such a wonderful job of depicting, I guess, the isolation, the coldness, kind of the death of what winter is. And I think we all especially are feeling that now in 2020. But he does it without forgetting the joy. Like he doesn't forget the joy of what winter brings as well. And to me, it's an overwhelmingly happy and joyous concerto to play. It's exciting. So I was hoping to bring those elements to the performance that you will hear soon.
Well, it's been recorded, for so many decades by every leading violinist, all four of these concertos that make up the Four Seasons. And you'll find, interpretations all across the spectrum of how people approach this, a very traditional, approach where, everything is kind of in its place, maybe more modest tempos. And then you have violinists who really try to enhance that text painting that you were talking about, really overemphasize every little nuance that's there. And you came into rehearsal with a very clear idea of what you wanted to accomplish in this piece. Have you lived with this concerto for a while? Meaning, have you, kind of thought about it different ways as you've gotten older and come back to it? Or have you always kind of figured out, what you wanted to do with this piece and how it strikes you?
Well, actually, it's the first time I've learned the concerto was for this performance. I've of course have played the orchestra part many times. I've played some of the other seasons, but I've never actually studied and spent time really thinking about winter. And yeah, there's such an overwhelming amount of difference between a lot of the interpretations. And if I could, I would love to play it, correctly for the period in which it was written. I think it's difficult when you try to do that with modern instruments. So I try to do a mix of the two. So I guess, to give one very simple example would be the use of vibrato. And for us modern violinists, we're always told to use vibrato on every note, right? Don't leave it out. Whereas in that time period, it would have been used more as an ornament. Or also talking about the tempos used. There's, more Russian interpretations, it's a little slower and heavier. If you go with more of the period interpretation, they're a little quicker. So yeah, I guess it was an interesting battle trying to figure out what that happy medium is for me, where I'm bringing in what I think was the true intent that Vivaldi had in writing it and the sound that he had in his mind, while still understanding that we have modern instruments and modern technique, and we're playing with an A tuned to 440, or 441. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of battle. It's the same thing with Bach and other composers as well.
Very true. I appreciate that insight, and we appreciate your marvelous performance on this broadcast. This Saturday, 7:30, our second virtual concert. It's an all Baroque Christmas program. Of course, this is the time of year where traditionally we be hard at work with our Messiah and Bach Christmas Oratorio. Of course, that is not possible in the time of COVID. So this is an all instrumental program, music from France, from Italy, and from Germany. And Sarah Page, you play a huge part in this program with your performance of Winter. Thank you for spending a little time with us. To all of you tuning in, please join us this Saturday at 7:30. You can find us on our Facebook page, our website, or our YouTube channel to tune in for that broadcast. Sarah, great to see you, and look forward to January when we're back together again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.